While Terán toured Texas, political upheaval threatened to tear Mexico apart. In 1827, Vice President Nicolás Bravo Rueda instigated a centralist rebellion, which Federalist generals Vicente Guerrero and Antonio Lopez de Santana promptly slapped down. The 1828 elections pitted the Federalist, Guerrero, against a centralist candidate, Manuel Gómez Pedraza. Returns from 10 of the 19 states pronounced Gómez Pedraza the victor. Nevertheless, Federalists refused to transfer power, claiming that the opposition candidate had fraudulently pressured the army to confirm him. Pandemonium reigned as the two rival governments, each supported by its own soldiers, disputed the presidential succession. The Federalists finally won the upper hand, forcing Gómez Pedraza to surrender the executive office. Ironic it was that the Federalists, Mexicans who ostensibly supported constitutional government and the rule of law, refused to acknowledge the results of the first national election sanctioned under the Constitution of 1824. Under the watchful eye of military authorities, President Guerrero faced multiple challenges as he strove to manage a government of dubious legitimacy. In July 1829, a Spanish force, in a bid to reclaim the country, landed at Tampico. In August, President Guerrero dispatched Santana to confront the invaders. The Mexican general besieged the Spaniards and, in October, forced them to surrender. Following the Spanish defeat, Mexicans of every stripe hailed Santana as the national savior. Once Santana sent the Spaniards packing, the Federalist president enacted sweeping reforms, which, in September 1829, included the Guerrero Decree, abolishing slavery throughout Mexico. Guerrero tenaciously retained the emergency powers granted him during the Spanish invasion. Although that threat had passed, this dictatorial authority enabled his restructuring of government and infuriated conservatives. Guerrero pushed too far, too fast, alienating even many moderates. In early 1830, the centralist vice president, Anastasio Bustamante, led a successful coup against Guerrero and assumed the executive office. Now that centralists had seized control, they could take up Terán's recommendations concerning Texas. He urged the government to bolster current presidios and construct new ones. He further proposed expanded coastal trade between Texas and the other Mexican states. This would, he explained, diminish the commercial influence of the United States, which he had recently observed in Nacogdoches. Finally, to offset the mushrooming Anglo-American population, he advised transporting European and Mexican colonists into Texas. The general did not mince words. Either the government occupies Texas now, or it is lost forever. Terán's recommendations both instigated and informed the Law of April 6, 1830, a provocative directive that actually exceeded his counsels. More than simply relocating Europeans and interior Mexicans into Texas, the decree forbade any more migration from the United States and even canceled all unfinished impresario contracts. Americans could relocate anywhere in Mexico except in territory adjacent to the United States. In other words, not in Texas. Quite enough Americans already lived there. The law further banned Southerners from bringing their slaves into Texas. Comporting with Federalist doctrines, Guerrero had earlier liberated every Mexican slave. Even so, the president, a mestizo of African descent, might have also wished it to reduce the pace of American settlement. Paradoxically, this was one liberal reform that the conservatives supported. On this issue, at least, the interest of the Federalist and the Centralist coincided. The Colonization Law of 1824 specified that Congress could pass such draconian legislation only under imperative circumstances. Lucas Ignacio Alemán y Escalada, Bustamante's Minister of Foreign Relations, personally drafted the law of April 6th. He suffered no doubts that conditions in Texas presented a clear and present danger and warranted swift and formidable countermeasures. Alemán believed that American migrants were participants in a U.S. conspiracy to wrest Texas away from Mexico, much like their countrymen had earlier attained Louisiana and Florida from Spain. Alemán insisted, where others send invading armies, the Americans send their colonists. The law of April 6, 1830, placed American settlers in Texas on notice that centralist administrators would not permit them to reconstruct their former lives on Mexican soil. As much as they might dislike the prospect, they would finally have to assimilate. When news of the decree arrived in Texas, the American colonists were outspoken in expressing their resentment and anxiety. Impresario Stephen F. Austin cautioned patience and attempted to tap down mounting tensions. Firmly, but tactfully, he wrote to both General Terán and President Bustamante, remonstrating against the new law. In the fullness of time, Austin was able to obtain an exemption for his contract and that of fellow impresario Green DeWitt. They were able to prove that they had acted in good faith and had brought in the requisite number of colonists. Austin and DeWitt managed to save their enterprises, but other impresarios were not so successful. Austin retained his loyalty to the Mexican Republic, but the torrent of punitive decrees emanating from the centralist Congress weakened his confidence in the Mexican government. Additionally, the April 6 law distressed Tejano elites. Their Anglo neighbors not only provided useful allies in the struggle against Indian marauders, but their industry was beginning to turn Texas around economically. If a rising tide lifts all boats, it seemed that centralist demands were forcing American boats out of port. Because they were more familiar with Spanish-Mexican legal traditions, because they believed that the centralists might be more receptive to native petitioners, Tejano leaders took the lead in contesting this despised ruling.